Picture a man, 47 years old, works hard, good provider, shows up when it counts. Last month, his daughter asked him to teach her how to drive. He said soon. He meant it. He just hasn't found the Saturday yet. He goes to the gym occasionally, doesn't smoke, watches what he eats, well, mostly. He drinks on weekends, sure, but nothing crazy, nothing he'd call a problem. By every visible measure, he's fine. His doctor tells him his blood pressure is a little high, but manageable. His wife says he seems distant lately. His kids notice he falls asleep on the couch most nights before 9. His closest friend from college, they haven't actually talked in 14 months. They keep meaning to. He is not a man in crisis. He is a man in slow decline. And the terrifying part? He has absolutely no idea. Right now, at this very moment, there are millions of men exactly like him, living reasonably decent lives, checking the obvious boxes, and quietly, invisibly, surrendering years, sometimes decades of their lives to habits so ordinary, so woven into the fabric of daily existence that nobody ever thinks to question them. Not their doctors, not their families, not them. And here's the number that should stop every man cold. In the United States, men die an average of 6 years earlier than women. 6 years. And before you say that's just biology, just the way things are, understand this. Researchers who have studied this gap for decades have concluded that the majority of it is not biological. It is behavioral. It is the accumulated weight of habits men have been taught to normalize, to ignore, to wear like a badge of honor. And I'm going to walk you through all 5 of them today. Now, most people, when they hear this topic, assume alcohol was at the top of the list. It is not. Alcohol was number 5. What sits above it, what is doing far more damage, is quieter, more invisible, and far more dangerous. In fact, the habit ranked number 1 on this list can silently erase up to 12 years of a man's life. 12 years. 12 years of Saturdays he'll never get to teach his daughter to drive. The ancient Stoics had a word for the unexamined life: amathia. Not ignorance in the simple sense, but the dangerous kind. The kind where a man thinks he understands what's happening to him, when in reality, he is completely blind to it. Zeno of Citium, the father of Stoic philosophy, taught that the first and most important act of wisdom is not strength, it is not discipline, it is not even courage. It is the willingness to see clearly. That is what we are going to do today. We are going to see clearly. We are going to look directly at the 5 habits stealing years from men's lives, and then we are going to do what the Stoics always did after they identified a problem. We are going to act. Stay with me through all 5, because if you recognize even one of these in your own life, and I promise you, you will, today can be the day something genuinely shifts.
Habit number 5, alcohol. Let's start with the one everybody expected to be number 1, alcohol. Now, I want to be careful here, because this isn't a lecture. This isn't a finger pointed at any man's Friday evening. The Stoics were never interested in shame. They were interested in truth. And the truth about alcohol is more nuanced and in some ways more alarming than the simple "drinking is bad for you" message most men tuned out years ago. Here is what the data actually shows. On average, alcohol shortens a man's life by roughly 2 to 3 years. That number sounds almost manageable, almost acceptable. And for a lot of men, that's exactly what makes it dangerous, because that average hides an enormous range underneath it. Some men who drink moderately see relatively minor impact, but men who drink the way most men actually drink in this country, fast, socially, on weekends, in bursts, can lose 10, 15, even 20 years. The difference is not just how much you drink, it's how you drink it. Think about the most common drinking pattern among men in the Western world. It isn't the nightly glass of wine, it's the week of restraint, followed by Friday night. It's 3, 4, 5 drinks compressed into a 2-hour window. It's drinking fast enough to feel it fast. That pattern, what researchers call binge drinking, is where the real damage lives. Here's the biology most men have never been told. Your liver can process approximately 1 standard drink per hour. 1, not 3, not 5, 1. When you drink faster than that, your liver doesn't simply fall behind, it begins to break down. Liver cells die faster than they can regenerate. Inflammation takes hold. Fat begins accumulating inside the tissue, and every single episode of binge drinking advances what researchers call hepatic fibrosis, the slow scarring of the liver, years before any symptom ever appears. And here's the piece that genuinely changes after 40. At 40, the liver's regenerative capacity begins declining significantly. The same Friday night habit your body shrugged off in your 20s now causes 2, sometimes 3 times the cellular damage. The body doesn't announce this shift. There's no warning. 1 year you're fine, and the decade that follows is doing something you won't discover until it's already done. But here's the question the biology doesn't answer. Why do men drink this way? Not for the taste, not for the sophistication, for the off switch, for the 5 hours where the internal monologue finally shuts up, for the permission to stop performing. That's what makes this habit insidious. It's not just poison. It's poison that promises relief from the very pressure the other habits on this list are creating. But here's the dimension that almost never gets discussed in the alcohol conversation, and it may be the most important one. Alcohol doesn't just damage the liver, it fundamentally reorganizes the brain's relationship with reward. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery, who had every reason to seek escape and comfort and numbing, wrote this: "No man is free who is not master of himself." He didn't write that as an abstraction. He wrote it because he understood from personal experience what it means to mistake a chain for a comfort. The ritual of the Friday drink starts as a reward. It feels earned, it feels social, it feels completely rational. But over time, almost imperceptibly, it becomes something else. It becomes the signal the nervous system waits for, the pressure valve the body has been conditioned to expect. And the moment it becomes expected, the moment a man notices he feels irritable or restless without it, the question Epictetus was asking has already been answered. Who is in control? The Stoic response to alcohol isn't abstinence for abstinence's sake, it's examination. It's the practice of asking, am I choosing this, or has this chosen me? Practical wisdom here is simple. Give yourself at minimum 2 completely alcohol-free days every week, not because a number in a health article told you to, but because the man who can choose not to drink demonstrates something to himself that matters far beyond his liver function. Eat before you drink. Slow down. Set a pace that respects what your body can actually process. And in the day after a night of drinking more than usual, give your system real recovery, hydration, real food, actual rest. Alcohol is number 5. It costs real years. But the habits above it, the others almost no man talks about, the ones carry no warning labels and trigger no morning regret, those are where the greatest damage quietly accumulates. Let's go to number 4.
Habit number 4, chronic stress. I want you to think about the last time you genuinely relaxed. Not slumped on the couch scrolling your phone, not watching something you've already seen because your brain is too tired for anything new. I mean the real thing, the kind of deep, settled calm where your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, and your mind actually goes quiet. For most men watching this, that memory is hard to place. And that difficulty is not a personality flaw. It is not weakness. It is the signature of a nervous system that has been running in emergency mode for so long that it has forgotten what normal feels like. Chronic stress, not the sharp, temporary stress of a deadline or a scare, but the low-grade, constant background hum stress of modern male life, is the 4th greatest threat to a man's lifespan. A longitudinal study spanning 3 decades found that men living with sustained chronic stress
lose an average of more than 4 years of their lives. And unlike alcohol, stress carries no social stigma. Nobody stages an intervention for a man who is chronically overloaded. Nobody warns him, because in the world most men live in, that level of pressure isn't a problem. It's expected. It's called success. Here's what's actually happening inside a man's body when stress becomes his permanent state. When the brain perceives a threat, any threat, it triggers the release of cortisol. This is ancient machinery built for survival. In a genuine emergency, cortisol is brilliant. It sharpens your focus, floods your muscles with glucose for energy, and makes you faster and more reactive than you'd normally be. The problem is that the brain cannot tell the difference between a lion in the grass and an email from your boss at 11 p.m. Both register as threat. Both trigger the same hormonal cascade. And when those triggers never stop, when the inbox is always full, the finances are always tight, the relationship always needs work, the kids need something, the job demands something, the future holds something to worry about, the cortisol never stops either. And here is where the body begins paying the bill. Sustained cortisol elevation degrades the immune system at a measurable rate, leaving men slower to fight infection, slower to recover from illness, and dramatically more vulnerable to inflammatory conditions. It forces the heart to work harder as blood vessels constrict under continuous chemical pressure. It keeps blood sugar chronically elevated, accelerating the path toward type 2 diabetes. It fragments sleep architecture, so even men who believe they're resting aren't actually recovering, because the stress hormones that should fall during the night never fully do. They lie awake at 3 in the morning, mind racing, can't explain why, staring at the ceiling, thinking about things that won't matter in 5 years, but feel absolutely critical at 3 a.m. And here's the part almost no man admits. He told everyone he was fine that day. He laughed at the right moments in the meeting. He nodded along when someone complained about trivial things. He performed fine so convincingly that he almost believed it himself. Until 3 a.m., until the performance ended and whatever was actually there came back. Every man watching this knows exactly what that feels like. Seneca wrote, and this is one of the most quietly devastating observations in all of philosophical literature. It is not that life is short, it is that we waste so much of it. He also wrote something that has stayed with me. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. Think about what chronic stress actually is in its purest form. It is a man living perpetually in a tomorrow that hasn't arrived yet, carrying the weight of outcomes he cannot control, scenarios that may never happen, futures built entirely from anxiety rather than reality. In the body, which only ever lives in the present moment, which can only ever experience right now, is paying the full biological price for a war being fought entirely in the imagination. Now, and this is critical, the Stoic solution to stress is not the culturally distorted version of Stoicism most men have been taught. The cultural version says, don't feel it, push through, man up, hold it together. That version is not Stoic philosophy. That version is the accelerant. That version is what's killing men. Real Stoicism, the kind Marcus Aurelius practiced through the Antonine Plague, through the Germanic Wars, through the deaths of his children, was not suppression, it was processing. It was the daily, disciplined practice of sitting with what was real, examining it honestly, separating what was within his control from what was not, and consciously releasing the grip on everything he could not change. He wrote in his private journal, a journal he never intended anyone to read, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not power over your feelings, not the elimination of difficulty. Power over the meaning you assign to it. Power over what you choose to carry forward." The practical prescription for chronic stress is not a spa weekend. It is a daily release valve. Small, consistent, non-negotiable. 10 minutes of walking with no destination and no phone. Not for fitness, for decompression. Because movement is the one thing that physiologically completes the cortisol cycle. It gives the body the physical release it mobilized for and allows the emergency to officially end. A single honest conversation where you say what you're actually carrying, not to fix it, not to burden anyone, but to break the silence that turns internal pressure into something toxic. A brief daily practice, 5 minutes of deliberate breathing, slow and controlled, that directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system and signals the body that it is safe to stand down. These are not soft suggestions. These are the biological requirements of a system that has been running without a cool down for years. Chronic stress is number 4, but the habits above it, and I need you to stay with me now, are things almost no man is talking about. Number 3, change the way I think about men's health entirely.
Habit number 3, social isolation. There's a specific kind of loneliness that is unique to men past 40. It doesn't look like loneliness. It doesn't announce itself. The man experiencing it might have a full house, a wife or partner, kids, colleagues, neighbors. He might go entire weeks without a single moment of physical solitude. And yet, there is not a single person on earth who actually knows what he's carrying. This is the nature of male social isolation in the modern world. It is not the dramatic, visible isolation of a man living alone in a cabin. It is the invisible isolation of a man who is technically surrounded by people, but genuinely known by none of them. There's a moment that comes for most men eventually. It might be at 2 a.m. when something genuinely bad happens. Or it might be on an ordinary Tuesday when they realize they've been carrying something heavy for weeks and haven't told a single soul. That moment, the quiet realization that there is no one, is not just sad. It's the body registering the absence of protection, and the body responds accordingly. Research has documented the timeline of this shift with almost painful precision. In their 20s, most men have robust social networks, friends from school, from early careers, from neighborhoods. Connection is ambient. It requires almost no effort because it's built into the structure of daily life. Then the structure changes. Careers intensify. Relationships become the primary focus. Children arrive. The casual infrastructure of friendship, the group chat, the regular hangout, the team, gradually dissolves. And because no single moment marks the end, because it happens one unreturned call at a time, one skipped reunion at a time, most men don't notice until the drift has become a gulf. By their 50s, studies show that a significant percentage of men have no close friendships at all. None. Not a single person they would call in a genuine crisis. Not one person who truly knows them. And here is what makes that not just sad, but medically catastrophic. A landmark meta-analysis that examined data from more than 300,000 people across multiple continents found that social isolation increases the risk of premature death by 50%. 50%. To put that in context, that is statistically comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes every single day. Nobody in his life hands a lonely man a warning label. Nobody tells him that the slow, polite drift from his friendships is carrying the same biological weight as a pack-and-a-half daily smoking habit. There's no public health campaign, no doctor's visit where the physician leans forward and says, "You don't have enough friends. That is going to kill you." But the data says that's exactly what it's doing. Here's the mechanism most people don't understand. Human beings are not merely social by preference. We are social by biological necessity. The nervous system was built for consistent, reliable signals of belonging. When those signals are absent, when a man's body registers day after day that there is no tribe, no group, no one watching his back, it responds the same way it responds to physical danger. It activates the stress response. Chronically isolated men show measurably elevated levels of inflammatory markers in their blood, the same markers associated with heart disease, accelerated aging, cognitive decline, and cancer.
Their immune systems operate less efficiently. Their blood pressure is harder to regulate. Their cortisol runs higher. Their sleep is lighter and less restorative. And the downward spiral is self-reinforcing. Isolation increases depression. Depression makes a man less likely to maintain his health, less likely to exercise, less likely to see a doctor, less likely to eat well. The very habits that might partially offset the damage become harder and harder to sustain. The Stoics are often portrayed as cold individualists, men who needed nothing and no one. This is a fundamental misreading of the philosophy, and ironically, it may be contributing to the very problem we're describing. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, devoted extraordinary attention to his gratitude for the specific people in his life: teachers, mentors, friends. He listed them by name. He described what he learned from each of them. He did not write about self-sufficiency in isolation. He wrote about self-sufficiency within community, the ability to maintain his own integrity regardless of what others thought of him, while remaining deeply and meaningfully connected to the people he loved. Seneca, one of the most quoted men in history on the subject of self-reliance, wrote this: "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can, but also welcome those who will make you better. Open your door." Those are not the words of a man who believed isolation was strength. Here is the genuinely hopeful part of this habit, and it matters enormously. The body responds to genuine human connection with almost immediate measurable change. A single meaningful conversation, not small talk, not status updates, but real contact, where something true is said and received, produces a measurable reduction in cortisol, a rise in oxytocin, and a demonstrable shift in immune function. Not after weeks of therapy, not after a sustained program of lifestyle change, after one real conversation. So the first move is not complicated. Think of one person you used to know well, whose company genuinely meant something to you, with whom the distance has grown through nothing more than neglect and busyness. Contact them this week, not with a performance of being fine, with something real, something honest, something that says, "I've been thinking about you. I miss this. How are you actually doing?" That single act is not just emotional maintenance, it is medicine. Social isolation is number 3, and what comes next is something that half the men watching this are in the middle of right now, tonight, without knowing it. Habit number 2, sleep deprivation. When did it become acceptable for men to be exhausted? Think about that. Think about how normalized this is. A man tells you he runs on 5 hours a night, and the response isn't alarm, it's almost admiration. He's dedicated, he's driven, he doesn't need much sleep. What if I told you that man is the equivalent of someone slowly driving drunk every single day, and nobody around him can see it, including him? Sleep deprivation is the second most destructive habit on this list, and it is arguably the most normalized. A major study published by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine tracked men over decades and found something that should permanently change the way we think about sleep as a society. Men who consistently sleep fewer than 6 hours per night die an average of more than 7 years earlier than men who get adequate rest. 7 years. Not from one catastrophic event, from the quiet, cumulative, compounding damage of a body that was never given the conditions it needed to repair itself. To understand why sleep deprivation is this destructive, you have to understand what sleep actually is. Because most men think of sleep the way they think of charging a phone. You plug it in, it fills up, you go. That mental model is dangerously incomplete. Sleep is not passive. Sleep is the most intensive biological repair process your body possesses, and it cannot be fully replicated by anything else at any other time under any other conditions. During the deep stages of sleep, your brain activates what neuroscientists call the glymphatic system, essentially a biological washing mechanism that flushes toxic metabolic waste products from between neurons. These waste products, including proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease, accumulate throughout every waking hour, and can only be cleared during sleep. When you cut sleep short, they aren't cleared. They accumulate. Night after night, they build. Simultaneously, the cardiovascular system uses sleep to execute its most intensive maintenance. Heart rate drops, blood pressure falls, the entire circulatory system gets the only real rest that we'll have in a 24-hour period. Men who don't allow this process to complete are running a cardiovascular system that never fully recovers between days. The hormonal picture is equally alarming. Testosterone, the hormone most central to a man's energy, metabolism, mood, and physical vitality, is produced almost entirely during deep sleep. A 2011 study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that 1 week of sleeping 5 hours per night reduced testosterone levels in young men by 10 to 15%, the equivalent of aging 10 to 15 years in 7 days. Think about that. Men spend enormous energy and sometimes significant money worrying about testosterone levels, and the most powerful daily modulator of that hormone is the one thing many of them are casually, habitually destroying. There's an identity many men have adopted without realizing it. The guy who doesn't need much sleep. The guy who runs on less. It feels like strength. It feels like efficiency. But that identity is a trap. Because the moment you decide you're the kind of person who functions on 5 hours, you stop noticing the ways you're not functioning at all. You normalize the fog. You accept the fatigue is just how life is. And the biological damage doesn't care about your identity. It only cares about what you're actually giving your body. There is something else that makes this habit uniquely dangerous. A sleep-deprived man cannot accurately assess how impaired he is. This has been documented in controlled research settings with startling consistency. When subjects are restricted to 5 or 6 hours of sleep for 2 weeks and then tested on cognitive performance, reaction time, working memory, decision-making, their scores are comparable to people who have been awake for 24 consecutive hours. But here's the part that matters. When those same subjects were asked to rate how impaired they felt, they said they were fine. A little tired, sure, but fine. The brain, sufficiently deprived of sleep, loses the ability to accurately perceive its own impairment.
Which means millions of men are walking around, driving, making decisions, working, parenting, genuinely believing they are functioning adequately, while their cardiovascular systems are under measurable strain, their immune systems are operating at 30% below capacity, their testosterone is suppressed, their blood sugar regulation is compromised, and their cognitive function is, by objective measure, severely degraded. Epictetus said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." There is no version of the man most men want to be, the fully present father, the sharp and effective professional, the calm and grounded partner, the man with enough energy to actually live his life rather than merely survive it. That man is biologically unavailable to you when you are chronically deprived. Not because you lack discipline, not because you lack desire, because the instrument through which you exist in the world, your body, has been denied the conditions required for its most essential maintenance. Now here is where this habit diverges significantly from most of the others on this list. The recovery window for sleep is fast, remarkably fast. Research consistently shows that after just 2 to 3 nights of complete, adequate sleep, 7 to 9 hours uninterrupted, blood pressure begins measurably declining, cortisol normalizes, testosterone rebounds, inflammation markers drop, cognitive test scores recover substantially, hunger hormones rebalance, reducing cravings and supporting healthier weight almost automatically. The body doesn't hold a grudge. It doesn't require months of effort before it responds. It is waiting right now for the conditions that will allow it to do what it has always known how to do. You simply have to stop taking those conditions away from it. 3 practical shifts that make an immediate difference. First, a consistent sleep and wake time, including weekends, not as a punishment, as a gift to your circadian rhythm, which regulates nearly every hormonal process in your body and which requires regularity to function at its full capacity. Second, screens off 90 minutes before bed, not because it's virtuous,
but because blue light wavelengths directly suppress melatonin production and send a clear signal to your brain that it is still daytime. The show will be there tomorrow. Your window for deep sleep tonight will not come back. Third, a cool, dark, quiet sleeping environment. These are not luxuries. They are the biological prerequisites for the deep sleep stages where the most critical repair happens. Your body temperature must drop slightly to enter deep sleep. Light disrupts the sleep cycle at the neurological level. Your body has known what it needed since long before any of us were born. Sleep deprivation costs man more than any other habit, except one. And the one habit that outranks it is going to surprise you.
Habit number 1, sedentary living. I want you to do something for a moment. Think about how much of your yesterday you spent sitting, not exercising, not walking, just sitting in a car, at a desk, on a couch, at a table, in front of a screen. If you are an average man in the modern world, that number is somewhere between 9 and 13 hours. 9 to 13 hours of stillness. And here is why that number is the most dangerous on this entire list. A 20-year study that tracked more than 120,000 people found that men who sit for more than 8 hours per day without regular movement breaks faces 60% higher risk of premature death, independent of whether they exercise. Meaning, men who go to the gym 3 times a week but sit for 10 hours a day are still carrying elevated mortality risk because the damage from prolonged sitting is not undone by periodic exercise. It is undone only by interrupting the sitting itself. A sedentary lifestyle overall, a life in which movement is the exception rather than the ambient background, can reduce a man's lifespan by up to 12 years. 12 years! Not from a crisis, not from a vice, not from a single catastrophic decision, from sitting in a chair. Here's why this habit ranks above alcohol, above stress, above isolation, above sleep deprivation on the scale of damage done to men's lives. Because it carries absolutely no signature of harm. Alcohol at least has the decency to produce a hangover. Stress at least generates anxiety. Poor sleep at least makes you feel tired. Social isolation at least creates a vague, gnawing ache. Sitting feels like nothing. Sitting feels like rest. It feels like productivity. It feels like, finally, after a long day, getting to just be. And all the while, something deeply consequential is happening inside the body. The human body was engineered across hundreds of thousands of years of evolution for near constant low-level movement, not for intense exercise, not for athletic performance, for the steady, distributed, ongoing physical activity of a life spent doing things, walking, carrying, building, moving through the world. Modern life has extracted almost all of that movement from daily existence, and the body is responding to its absence in ways that are only now being fully understood. After approximately 30 minutes of uninterrupted sitting, the large muscle groups of the lower body, among the most metabolically active tissue in the entire human body, essentially enter a state of suspension. Metabolic rate drops. The enzyme lipoprotein lipase, which plays a critical role in breaking down fats in the bloodstream, decreases by up to 90%. 90%. Blood circulation begins to slow. Blood pools in the lower extremities. The delivery of oxygenated blood to the brain decreases, producing the familiar mid-afternoon cognitive fog that most men interpret as fatigue and solve by consuming more caffeine, which deepens the very problem driving it. Insulin sensitivity begins to degrade. The risk of developing type 2 diabetes climbs with every hour of uninterrupted sitting. Bone density quietly decreases as the body responds to the absence of mechanical load. The spine compresses. The hip flexors shorten. The glutes, one of the most powerful and protective muscle groups in the body, begin to functionally disengage. And the immune system's efficiency falls alongside all of it. This is death by degrees, not the dramatic kind that makes a story, the kind that happens so slowly you don't notice you're freezing until you can no longer move.
The body doesn't send a warning when it's losing the capacity to regulate blood sugar. It doesn't announce that the immune system is operating at 70%. It just quietly, incrementally becomes less capable. And one day, a diagnosis arrives that feels sudden, but was actually years in the making, 1 hour in the chair at a time. But perhaps the most quietly alarming element of this habit is what it does to a man's mental and emotional state over time. The body was built to move. When it doesn't move, not occasionally, but day after day, month after month, something in the psychology shifts. Energy drops, mood flattens, motivation becomes genuinely difficult to access, not because the man has changed, but because the chemistry of a body that never moves is fundamentally different from the chemistry of a body that does. And the cruelty of the cycle is this: the less a man moves, the less he wants to move. The flatness becomes the default. The stillness feels normal, and the energy, the drive, the physical sense of being alive and capable in a body, those things don't disappear in a dramatic moment. They just slowly, quietly fade. Marcus Aurelius was not a man who sat still. He led armies in the field into his late 50s. He rose before dawn every single day, not because the empire demanded it, though it did, but because he understood something the Stoics treated as foundational truth. The body is not a vessel for the mind. It is not a container you carry around while the real work happens upstairs. The body is the instrument. It is the only means through which the mind acts in the world, through which presence is felt, through which energy is generated or withheld, through which clarity is possible or impossible. A body that is declining in health is not just a medical problem, it is a philosophical one. It limits every aspiration, every relationship, every contribution a man hoped to make. Now here is the most important and most liberating truth about this habit. The threshold for change is almost insultingly low. You do not need a gym. You do not need a fitness program. You do not need to restructure your schedule or invest in equipment or commit to something you'll abandon in 3 weeks. You need to stand up and move for 2 minutes every 30 minutes. That's it. That is the minimum effective dose that research identifies as sufficient to interrupt the metabolic shutdown, to restart circulation, reactivate the muscles, reset insulin sensitivity, and restore oxygenated blood flow to the brain. 2 minutes, every 30 minutes. A walk after each meal, even 5 minutes, has been shown in clinical research to reduce blood sugar spikes by a significant margin, reducing the long-term risk of diabetes meaningfully with almost zero additional time investment. Phone calls taken standing, stairs chosen deliberately over elevators, a short walk at lunchtime that has nothing to do with fitness and everything to do with giving the body the movement signal it has been waiting all morning. None of these are remarkable in isolation. None of them feel like transformation. But the body doesn't require grand gestures. It requires consistency. And the man who stands up 2 minutes earlier than he otherwise would, every half hour, every day for the rest of his life, is making a choice that compounds over years into something extraordinary, not because any single moment matters, because 10,000 accumulated moments do.
The Stoic reckoning. Let's pause here for a moment and look at the full picture. Not each habit in isolation, all of them together. Alcohol, on the worst end of the spectrum, costs a man up to 20 years, on average 2 to 3. Chronic stress erodes 4 or more. Social isolation carries the mortality risk equivalent of daily heavy smoking and can take 5 or more years. Sleep deprivation silently removes 7 or more. In a sedentary life, the #1 habit on this list, the habit so ordinary it's invisible, can erase up to 12. Now, I want you to understand something about those numbers. They do not exist in isolation from each other. They stack, they compound, they interact. The man who is sleep-deprived makes worse decisions about alcohol. The man under chronic stress is more isolated because stress makes him withdraw. The isolated man moves less because there is less reason to get up and go somewhere. The sedentary man sleeps worse because his body hasn't been given the movement signals that regulate sleep quality. These 5 habits feed each other. They form a system, and when a man is caught in that system,
as millions of men are right now, tonight, he is not just experiencing 5 separate risks, he is experiencing a compounding biological process that accelerates aging, diminishes vitality, and quietly reroutes the trajectory of his life in a direction he never chose. The Stoics practiced something they called memento mori. It translates literally as, remember that you will die. In the hands of a lesser philosophy, that would simply be grim, but the Stoics were not grim. They were clear. They used memento mori not to create fear, but to create precision, because the man who genuinely holds the reality of his mortality, who doesn't push it to some abstract, distant, not yet corner of his awareness, but actually feels the weight of it, that man does not waste time. He does not sleepwalk through his days. He does not let years accumulate into a life he didn't really intend to live. He lives deliberately. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world during his lifetime, wrote in his private journal, a journal found only after his death, words I think every man should read at least once. How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he himself is doing. Not what the culture says is normal, not what other men around him are doing, what he is doing. Here is the truth that the data, the science, and 2,000 years of Stoic philosophy are all pointing toward from different directions. Men do not lose years of their lives in dramatic, identifiable moments. They lose them in the accumulated weight of small choices made unconsciously, choices so normalized by the culture around them that they stopped feeling like choices at all. That is both the troubling and the most empowering thing I can tell you today. Troubling because it means the damage was being done long before any symptom appeared. Empowering because it means the reversal begins not with a major intervention or a life overhaul or a dramatic commitment to a new identity. It begins with the next small choice. You don't need perfect. Perfect is the enemy of enough. And enough, standing up every 30 minutes, sleeping 7 hours, calling one friend, enough, sustained over years, is transformation. Not because any single moment matters, because you are showing your body day after day that you are finally paying attention.
I'm not going to end this with a list of things you should do eventually. Eventually is where good intentions go to wait until they're no longer relevant. I'm going to end with 3 things you can do right now, today, before this video ends. Number 1, stand up. Right now. If you've been sitting through this entire video, stand up. Walk for 2 minutes, just 2. Let your body remember what movement feels like. Let the blood flow, let the muscles wake up. Number 2, tonight, go to bed 30 minutes earlier than you normally would. Just 30 minutes, not because you have to, but because you are finally choosing to give your body what it has been asking for. Number 3, before this week ends, reach out to one person you've been meaning to call. Not a text, a call, a real one. Tell them you were thinking about them. Ask them how they actually are. And if you have the courage, tell them the truth about how you are too. That's it. Not a 12-step program, not a complete life overhaul. 3 small choices. 3 signals to your body and your mind that you are no longer sleepwalking. Marcus Aurelius wrote something else, something I want to leave with you. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly. The quality of your thoughts and the quality of your habits, which are just thoughts made physical, determines the quality of your life. You have been given this body, this mind, this life, not for forever, for now. What you do with now matters. If this video gave you something useful, if it woke something up or reminded you of something you'd forgotten, share it with someone you care about. Subscribe if you want more of this ancient wisdom applied to modern life, and take care of yourself.